any influence and power and authority you have was given to you by God, not so that you could own it, but so that you could steward it on behalf of him. Okay, this is the principle of stewardship. All right, so we are in Genesis chapter 41, right around verse 39. Then Pharaoh says to Joseph, since God has made all this known to you, and what he's referencing are these dreams. Remember, Pharaoh had the dreams, Joseph interpreted them. So Pharaoh's looking at Joseph and he's like, hey, God told you all this stuff. There is no one as discerning and wise as you. You will be in charge of my palace, and all my people are to submit to your orders. Only with respect to the throne will I be greater than you. So Pharaoh said to Joseph, I hereby put you in charge of the whole land of Egypt. Then Pharaoh took the signet ring from his finger and put it on Joseph's hand. He dressed him in robes of fine linen and put a gold chain around his neck. He had him ride a chariot as his second in command, and people shouted before him, make way! Thus he put him in charge of all of Egypt. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, I am Pharaoh, but without your word, no one will lift hand or foot. He gave him a new name, he gave him a wife, and Joseph then went throughout the land of Egypt. Joseph was 30 years old when he entered the service of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. And Joseph went out from Pharaoh's presence and traveled throughout Egypt. Let's get out of your you know how sometimes when you read scripture, it becomes overly familiar? It does. Now you don't know that, but I'm telling you that. I'm telling you, my friends, that sometimes when you read scripture and Bible stories, it becomes overly familiar to you because you know the end. But let's lay this out in real life, okay? From 17 to 30, Joseph has been a slave. He was a slave in kind of a nice place, and then he was a slave in prison. He was a slave the whole time. He was betrayed by his brothers. He was likely beaten and mistreated. When he did the right thing, he got thrown into prison, and then he was forgotten. This is our guy Joseph. And all of a sudden, everything is turning around for him. And all of a sudden, Pharaoh sees something about Joseph that is particular and unique, and that causes Pharaoh to give Joseph almost all the power that he has. And the thing that he sees in Joseph is this. He sees a man who is fully under the lordship of God. Pharaoh says to him, since God has made all this known to you. You see, Joseph, he could have lived sort of under the lordship of his dad. He could have submitted to his brothers and lived under the lordship of his brothers. He could have submitted to the ways of Egypt and lived under the lordship of Egypt. He served Potiphar, but he was not under the lordship of Potiphar. Over and over and over, in the worst places of his life, Joseph took him back and remembered who he was. He is a God-fearing man. And the fruit of that was such a degree of wisdom and discernment that Pharaoh says, regardless of where you've come from, I am going to elevate you to a place of incredible privilege. So Joseph centers himself on God, and the way that we see him doing this is that Joseph is really clear about the difference between stewardship and ownership. Stewardship and ownership. You see, Pharaoh gives Joseph every exterior and interior symbol of power and authority. But we all know, reading the story, that what Pharaoh is not saying to Joseph is all right, now I'm just gonna go kick it and you're the Pharaoh now. That's not what he's saying, right? Pharaoh is saying I'm still Pharaoh, but I'm giving you everything. And why am I giving it to you? To steward on my behalf. to steward on my behalf. Not to own, not to take as your own, but to steward on my behalf. And this is one of the first principles that we see. It's that any authority that Joseph had, and my friends, if you are a Christian, any authority that you have as a parent, as a bus driver, as the captain of your team, as an influencer, as somebody who can make policy or hire or fire, any influence and power and authority you have was given to you by God, not so that you could own it, but so that you could steward it on behalf of Him. Okay, this is the principle of stewardship. Healthy authority understands power and resource as something to steward, not to own. Like even Spider-Man knew that, right? Right? With great power comes something like great response. I don't even know what he said. But Spider-Man and Joseph, they understood the same thing. If you are given power and authority, it is yours to steward rightly and well. Have you not noticed that when you look at your own life or the world around you, that when people start to own power and authority, it works out awesome for them and really bad for everyone else? Have you ever noticed that? The same is true for you and for me. It's not just other people who do not know how to wield their authority, responsibility, stuff, or power. It's us. It's me. The second I think I own this pulpit, y'all stop listening to me. We are given what we have to steward on behalf of God. And if you have any authority in your life, you are like Joseph, meant to recognize what Pharaoh is not saying is that now I'm Pharaoh. What Pharaoh is saying, that he has entrusted something sacred to me. God has entrusted something sacred to many of you. This is the principle of stewardship. Now we see that Joseph was given outward signs of authority. He gets a ring, he gets fancy clothes, he gets a chain, he gets some sneakers. Not really. Thank you for laughing. I thought it was funny. He gets all the outward trappings of authority, and we like outward trappings of authority, don't we? Like, we like it when our title gets promoted. We like it when, the office changes, or we get, the different color lanyard at work that shows everybody we can make it up to the top floor. Whatever the thing is, everybody kind of likes your own little way in, that shows that you have some sort of exterior positional power. But let's take a look at what was really going on with Joseph. Because trust me, Joseph tooling around Egypt, if all the man had with him was a cool ring and a tunic, they could just throw him back into a pit. So what was it that actually gave him his actual credibility? Well, let's look at what came before he turned 30? Shoot. Years 17 to 29. What happened when he was 17? Oh yeah. He was betrayed. He was sold into slavery. Here is where it is that Joseph learned wisdom and discernment. First, he learned through being faithful in difficult years. He learned wisdom and discernment by faithfulness in difficulty. Don't you really not like this truth? I wish we could learn wisdom and discernment when everything was awesome. But typically we don't. And the grace of God is that when we go through difficulty, injustice, difficulty sometimes that we bring on ourselves, whatever the case may be, when we go through difficulty, it is in these places that we cultivate fruits of the Spirit like patience, like true hope. You know the difference between cheap hope and true hope? It's someone who's held it through difficulty. So Joseph was faithful in times of difficulty. He grew in resilience. He allowed the pain of his life to somehow create in him an inner man that honored God. We all love the sound of that at the end. We don't like that it comes through difficulty. He was also faithful in the hidden places. Do you remember from a few messages ago that Joseph, Scripture tells us, year after year, Potiphar's wife was all after him, and he kept saying no. Year after year, no one saw him do the right thing. He said yes to integrity, no to temptation. Yes to integrity, no to temptation. Have you ever done the right thing and nobody noticed and you got mad? Have you ever had that happen? You're like, I did the stupid right thing, and like there's no one here to be like, high five. High five myself. Joseph, I high five myself. It's allowed. Year after year, he says yes to integrity and no to temptation. And here's the kicker. It didn't even work out awesome for him. Because after all of that integrity work, he got falsely accused and still thrown into jail. Over and over and over, where no one sees where you are, no one sees what you do, no one is asking and no one is caring. You say yes to integrity and no to temptation. Yes to integrity in the smallest of ways as well. We hate the small, don't we? We hate the small. In small, in hidden, in difficult ways. He said yes, yes, yes to the way of God and no to the way of temptation. And something in him became transformed. So much so that this 17-year-old egotistical, obnoxious baby brother who kind of almost had it coming turns into a 30-year-old man who is so wise and so discerning and so filled with the presence and power of God that the most powerful man almost in the world says to him, I trust you to take everything I have and care for it wisely. That, I think, is the kind of person we all want to be. But at the same time, we don't like the difficult or the hidden or the small. When I was in my 20s, it was like 30 years ago, when I was in my 20s, people always used to talk about your 20s as being the time of life for character formation. Anyone heard that? I hate that phrase. When I was in my 20s, I was like, nuh-uh. My 20s are for me to be awesome and achieve my goals. Right? What's this thing called character formation? Character formation doesn't sound super sexy. It's not. It doesn't sound super public. It's not. Character formation is the developmental spiritual stage where you are learning self-control, patience, peace, where, as my dad taught me, you learn to say no to the good so you can say yes to the great. Character formation, becoming Christ-like. And just like in any developmental stage, even with a child, you've got, kiddos will sometimes miss a particular developmental stage. Someone's, kid will miss, they don't crawl, they just go, straight to walking. And some parents are like, woohoo, they're so advanced. And I was always like, dude, hold still, like a little bit more. But the reality is, when you miss a developmental stage, you actually miss brain development. Right? It's not just like, oh, they didn't crawl. It's like, oh, there was a little thing that was supposed to be happening in their brains that didn't quite get to happen. And so it has to happen later. Have you ever met somebody who missed the developmental stage of character formation? Yeah. Okay. You can be 70 and not do this. But let me tell you right now, if you are 16, let it happen. Lean into it, to the difficult and the hidden and the small. This is why, church, we need to surround our future gen, because this is hard work. But it's in that interior work that he became an interior man who was wise and discerning and who deserved the authority that he was given. Do you not want more people in this world who actually deserve the authority they have? Like because of their interior honorable selves.